And what I love for anyone listening who needs to hear this is no one can tell you you're not the right fit. No one. And you can get all the no's in the world, but you have your knowing. And by the way, I believe this, Mel. I believe even when you trust your knowing and then it seems like it was wrong and things don't go your way over and over and over. Like I look back at those moments, right? I really wanted that investor to invest in us. Thank God he didn't. When I say everything's happening for us, what I mean is like, I was so desperate that if he would have invested in us then, I probably would have given him the majority of the company for probably almost no money, right? By the time, many years, 6 years later, after that day, 6 years later, when L'Oreal bought this little company I started in my living room for $1.2 billion cash, it was still, I was the largest shareholder. Paulo and I were the largest shareholders. And I look back and it's like, oh gosh, thank God all the no's happened when they did, even when they sucked, even when it felt like it wasn't fair. And I can look at that in many scenarios. Sometimes we don't have some big positive outcome, but we learn a purpose through a no. Right? We learn a calling through a no.
You're 3 years in.
Yeah.
You've burned through the money.
Yes.
You have been told no by everybody. And even though you have leveraged all of the steps that were ordered along the way and like an amazing Denny's waitress, you can talk to anybody, you can hustle, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
You have nothing but closed doors in front of you.
Yes.
And a ton of product and no money.
Yes.
What is the turning point?
Yes.
Why did you not give up?
Yeah. So 2 big things happened. The first was in the form of a crazy, painful rejection. So I thought, Mel, so we got a call from a big potential investor and very famous for launching all these sort of unknown brands and making them big products we all buy in grocery stores. And, and I thought, and they gotten a hold of our product. And I thought like, oh, if they invest, then A, I'm not going to go bankrupt. B, like we can leverage their clout to get in these stores that keep telling me no. Like I had this whole scenario planned out that was like this Pretty Woman moment, right? Where I was like, oh, he's going to save the day. And so we started taking meeting after meeting, it got down to the final meeting with this huge investment firm. And it was in person. My husband and I actually flew to the meeting. And the head guy was about 3 feet from me.
Yeah.
And his whole team was there, who was awesome. I just presented our whole future product pipeline. And he says, you should be so proud of this product you've created. It's really, really good. But it's a no. We're going to pass on investing in it cosmetics. And I was like, okay, can you tell me why? Because I'm so used to hearing no. And I was like, okay, even though really I was devastated. But
well, yeah, because they just led you on and you just went through it. And this was supposed to be the meeting where they're like, let's do this.
And I was so hopeful and I was so desperate.
Yeah.
And he got very quiet and he says to me, do you want to know, I said, can you tell me why? And he says to me, do you want me to be really honest with you? And I said, yes, please. And he got really quiet and he's like 3 feet from me in person. And he says, I just don't think women will buy makeup from someone who looks like you with your body and your weight. And when he said that to me, and this is why it was such a big moment for me, when he said that to me, first of all, a lifetime of body doubt and self-doubt. Like I remember it flooding my body all at once. And when I looked at him, I actually felt no anger toward him. I felt like I was almost like staring my own fear straight in the eye. But when he said those words to me, Mel, and this is when we talk about purpose and intuition, he said, I just don't think women will buy makeup for someone who looks like you with your body and your weight. The second he said that, I felt this feeling in my gut. Like I can remember it like it was yesterday, this like strong feeling that said, he's wrong. Like I felt it, right? And I didn't know how I was going to prove it, but I felt that feeling. And what I realized later when I look back at that moment, this dude gave me a no, but God gave me a knowing in that moment. And I believe every one of us has had someone tell us we're not the right fit or no, or you don't have what it takes. Sometimes we're the ones telling ourselves that.
I don't love you anymore.
Yes, right? But if you get still and you learn to hear your knowing, I believe which one you listen to, if you listen to the no all the no's, all the rejections, all the self-doubt, or you get still and listen to your knowing, whether that's from your own intuition, from your creator, from the universe, whatever speaks to you, but we all have it. We all have it. And I believe our life and our purpose and and our entire destiny comes down to which one we listen to. Do you listen to the no or do you listen to the knowing?
Okay, I promised a masterclass. That right there is worth $1 billion. In life, are you going to listen to the no, or are you going to listen to the knowing inside of you? That's it.
Yeah.
As somebody who loves you and as your friend, when you shared that story with me and hearing you tell it again right now, I literally go, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. I go, I have that, my knowing goes, oh yeah? Oh yeah? You think, okay,
Yeah.
okay, let me show you. Like it's that, like I get that sort of mojo thing going when somebody says no like that at a moment like that. It's like, I'll show you.
Yeah.
And I guess I just got in this moment, sort of this wake up call that my knowing often feels like, I'll show you.
Yeah.
You missed out. You'll be sorry. What does yours sound like?
And it's almost always true. That's almost always true, right?
What does yours sound
So,
like? So is yours
yep.
like, or is it more of like,
I mean, in that case, I was devastated and at the same time had this strong, it was just a peace. Honestly, in that moment, it was a peace. He's wrong. And that didn't make sense in my head. Why? Because I had had 3 years of hundreds of rejections. And this is the thing, right? Jay-Z says the genius thing we did was we didn't give up.
mm,
That's like one of my favorite quotes of his. In that moment, everything told me to give up, Mel. I mean, it was hundreds of rejections. And now it felt what felt like my last hope of desperation told me something totally different. No, because not only do I not believe in anything you're doing necessarily, but I actually just think you're personally not the right fit. Like women just won't buy makeup from. It was just like, oh my gosh, it was like all of these no's everywhere. And I want to share that because it's easy for someone to go, "Oh, wow, she built a billion-dollar company. She must have just got lucky." Or maybe she just had so many connections, or we always think, but really what it comes down to sometimes, in this case, that big moment for me, do you listen to the no's or you listen to the knowing, right?
yeah.
And I made that decision that day to trust the knowing, to trust myself. I kept feeling like I was supposed to keep going. I didn't know how, right? And
What do you do when you don't even know the next step? So you got this kind of, jerk who's like, yeah,
yeah,
they're not going to buy it because of your body type and this, that, and the other thing. You're like,
yeah,
yeah, you're wrong, motherfucker. But
yeah.
what do you do next?
So the next right step, the next thing that feels right when you can't even see how the heck
How
it's
how
going
do
to
you
work
even
out.
determine what the next right step is?
Yeah, you just get, for me, I just get still. I pray,
Yep.
you know that.
Yep.
I pray. And but whether for you, listening, it's prayer or it's the universe or your
Mm.
intuition, when you get still, all you can do is try to listen. Right. And try to live that answer, whatever it is, and take that next right step. And I just had this knowing I was supposed to keep going. And even when it didn't make sense. And, I remember crying myself to sleep. I remember writing in my journal, know your why, then fly, girl, fly. And
Mm.
I read those words every day till I didn't need the reminder. I would Google stories of people that had gone through thousands of rejections who no one would know that they went through them because they're so successful today. And I just kept trying to sort of build this toolbox of things I could lean on. But I,
And how did QVC come about?
oh,
Because
yeah,
you built It Cosmetics and it became, because of you, the most successful beauty brand on all of QVC. You did over
yes,
1,000 appearances.
yeah.
So how did you even get onto QVC? Because that in and of itself is no small feat.
Yeah, well, their head guy of beauty, who's like a legend, had said no to me many times. No, you're not the right fit. And I happened to be at this big beauty expo
And was this before or after this guy was like, no, we're not investing?
after,
After?
after,
So she has now gotten 3 years of no's.
yeah,
They're almost out of money. Her intuition is knowing that she's going to fly, girl, fly. So she is still showing up to a beauty expo
Yeah.
where I want you to understand in the business world, it's like going to a convention where everybody that you have ever fooled around with, who has then broken up with you, is attending. So everybody that has said no to
Yes.
her,
Yes.
she walks in and it's like, oh, here's this chick again, the it chick, right?
Yep.
The
Yep.
it cosmetics person that has been sending me the stuff and calling me, and we have told her no, do not make eye contact. So you are
I
now
love
at this thing.
This describes it exactly. Everyone you
Yes.
fooled around with who broke up with you and they're like, "Oh, don't make eye contact."
Yeah. Oh
It's
God,
that.
this chick again with the skin with the okay.
Yep.
So you're at this thing. You've been
Yes.
told no by the big person. It's been 3 years. So we're talking like 2011, 2012-ish. What do you do?
So you get this 3-foot table, right? It's a huge convention. There's 6,000 women at this convention.
Wow.
They're walking up and down, and it's every beauty brand in the world.
Are they
and
buying it for their stores or?
No, so what it is, it was this big cosmetic executive women awards show.
Okay.
And why you're there is you get a 3-foot table, you're demonstrating your product. You're hoping that someone who walks by either wants to carry your product in their stores or all the press is there. They
Right.
cover your product, or there's also you can win some big award. So I'm there. And then all the brands you can imagine, right, are there. And there's 6,000 women walking. And when I got there, I saw QVC had this huge booth in the background, and you're not allowed to leave your table, right? And I couldn't afford to get kicked out. But I just kept having this feeling like, okay, I've called them a million times. They've told me no forever, but I've never like met anyone in person, right? So I kept trying to sneak away from my table. And every time I got over there, the buyers would be mobbed with people. I eventually got over there, made my way to one of the buyers, introduced myself, poured my heart out. I remember sweat just dripping through my clothes because I was freaking out, down to no money.
Yeah.
I'll cut a real long story short, but she gave me her card. It's like when someone says, "Oh, DM me on Instagram." You don't know if they really
Right.
mean it. Then you're on your Instagram checking your DMs, and you're like, "Oh, they still haven't replied." And I thought, is that what it's going to be like? But she actually meant it. And I flew out, had a meeting with her. We got a yes, my first big yes, for one shot on QVC. And what it meant, Mel, was I was going to get this 10-minute segment live on the air, live in front of 100 million homes. And I either had to sell enough product to hit their sales goal
Yep.
or not come back. We were only doing 1 to 2 orders a day on our website.
Okay.
And
1 to 2 orders a day, everybody.
Yep.
After
Yep.
almost
3 years.
3 years of
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
This
And
is
barely
like,
keeping the lights on.
and so now you get your shot.
I
Like
get
there are
my
those
shot.
moments in life
Yes.
you're at bat
Yep.
and you got to be ready for those.
Yeah.
And so put us right there with you. What happened?
Yeah. What happened was I was about to learn one of the greatest life lessons I've ever learned to this day. Here's what I mean by that. So I found out I get one shot, and then I learn it's consignment, which means so first of all, I had to sell over 6,000 units of our concealer in this 10-minute window to hit their sales goal or not come back, which was about like $130,000 or $140,000 of product in a 10-minute window.
I also want to point out to everybody that's 10 years of sales on her website at the current amount.
Yeah.
So in 10 minutes, everybody,
Yeah.
she on live television
Yeah.
has to move 10 years worth of volume she was selling on her website at that time.
In one shot, like
In one shot. And she'd never done this before. I realize you were a television anchor, but this is a totally different thing.
Well, QVC, it's unlike stores where you can walk in and there's thousands of products in one space. Their 1 minute of airtime can get one product. So you're competing with the volume of like Apple iPhone or Dyson vacuum. You have to hit these high sales goals.
Yeah.
And what I quickly learned was the offer was consignment, which meant I wasn't guaranteed to be paid for it. I had to figure out how to get a loan to cover the cost of manufacturing 6,000 units of product, shipping it in, going through legal, going through QC, going through all of it. And then I learned if I go on air and it doesn't sell, I have to take it all back
Oh my God.
and therefore go out of business, right? So you should never, ever, ever accept a purchase order you can't afford to lose ever. But at this point, it was like, I think I'm I don't know what
This
else
is
to
it.
do. This
This
is
is
it.
the shot.
This is it. And so here's what happened. We went to 22 banks that all said no, and they probably should have. The 23rd bank, which was California Bank and Trust, and gave us a loan that covered our very first purchase order and a little bit more. So I took the little bit more. We hired third-party consultants. I'm like, I'm going all in. I want to do the best 10 minutes I
Yeah.
could possibly do. I want to have no regrets. And they all told me the same thing,
Which is?
if you want a chance at making it, here's what you need to do. You need to use this type of model to demonstrate your product, which is flawless skin, early 20s, all the same skin tone. And I'm like, okay, but that's inauthentic. That's not why I'm building this brand. I'm like, what if I put models in their 70s and then and someone with hyperpigmentation and someone with acne and what if I take my own makeup off on national TV and I could prove live how the product works? And they were mortified. And here's the thing, Mel, they wanted me to win. Like they were giving me the best advice that they know how. And
This had never been done. So is this 2011?
This is 2010. Yeah,
So
end of
2010,
2010.
everybody.
Mhm.
So this was not something people did. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about the person who changed the industry
Mm.
right here. And this is the moment you're hearing it. And everybody that were the quote experts
Yeah.
were saying no. And this goes back to one of the major takeaways that you were learning from our professor of purpose, Jamie Kern Lima. And that is there's a huge difference between a no and a knowing.
Yeah.
And if
Huge.
you're the only you that will ever exist, your knowing is the unique difference that you're going to make in this world. And in
Yes.
this moment, with one shot to go, everything on the line, a loan from 1 out of 23 banks that was willing, she said, no way to the freaking experts. And she listened to her knowing. So when you walked into QVC with normal human beings, no flawless
Yeah.
models, no one with perfect skin, all
Yeah.
ages, all body types.
Yep. Yep.
Did people say, wait, you can't take them on the air? Or was there any, like, were people like, oh, she's got, this is just going to be terrible? Like, what was that like when you walked in? Did they even know you were going to take your makeup off?
I let them know I wanted to. And QVC was great. Here's the thing about QVC is like they want everyone to be their authentic selves. It's just
Yep.
this has never been done this way before.
Okay.
And I wish I could say it was easy for me to just go, I'm just going to go with my knowing. But the truth is, I flew out there a week early, Mel. I sat in a rental car in the parking lot, cried every day. I actually second guessed myself. I'm like, if I do it, maybe I'll do it their way first. Then I'll make money. Then I'll do it my way. But I know that, authenticity, you can't fake authenticity. And authenticity alone doesn't automatically guarantee success. But what I do know is inauthenticity guarantees failure every time.
Okay, everybody, stop. The professor classes in session. Did you hear that? That inauthenticity, being fake, trying to do something everybody else's way, because that's just, you're too insecure to do it your way.
Yeah.
That never guarantees success.
Yeah.
Authenticity, your knowing, your special spin on things.
Yeah.
That is the pathway to purpose and success.
Yeah.
There is no other way.
Yeah.
And so after a week of crying in your rental car in the parking lot at QVC, you were like, I'm going with the knowing.
I'm going with the knowing.
And so tell us about that first appearance. You're standing there on a television set. There's a bazillion cameras. The lights are bright.
Yeah.
You got your models there.
Yeah.
You're taking the risk of your lifetime on live television in front of 100 million homes.
Yes.
You are doing something that has never been done on television before.
Yeah, I remember literally I wore 2 pairs of Spanx, Mel, not because I cared how I looked, but, like, I was so freaked out, like, my hands were shaking and I was sweating through my clothes, so I had on double Spanx under my dress, and I remember the moment the camera went live, right? And there's a big countdown clock on the floor that started at 10 minutes, and by the way, a minute or 2 before I went onto the set, I learned you're not guaranteed your 10 minutes.
Why?
If you are a minute or 2 into your cell and you're not hitting numbers, they know by the second. Your clock, you might think you have 8 minutes still to go, and your clock will jump to 1 or jump to 2 minutes left.
Because your product's a flop.
Yep, exactly.
And you're a flop. So you literally are racing against the clock to be successful out of the gate. So what did you do to like hook everybody? Did you take your makeup off right away? Did you what did you
Yeah.
do?
So I first of all, I go out of the, I go live. I remember it was like 9:59, 9:58, 9, and I'm like, and I remember I had practiced in my bathroom mirror, right? So many times. If I had known the high five habit then, I would have been way more confident. But I was practicing in the bathroom mirror this demonstration a million times on my wrist, how our concealer doesn't crease and the best 2 selling concealers crease. And I'd done this demonstration like this where I show it and they all start to crease. So I'm holding my wrist up, trying to do this as we go live to show that, but my hand's like this now. And it was never like shaking when I was doing it a million
Meaning it
times.
wouldn't bend, everybody. Like she
Yeah.
was so
So
anxiety ridden that she's
yes.
sweating through her 2 pairs of Spanx, and
Yes.
her wrist will not bend, so she cannot demonstrate that her product won't crease.
Yes, and the host grabbed my wrist and was like, "Thank you, sugar," and she took over. And then I remember my bright red bare face before shot coming up on national television. I remember walking over to our models, real women, all shapes, sizes, skin tones, skin challenges, calling them beautiful, meaning it. I remember
Did you take so when did you take your makeup off? When she
so
grabbed your hand and said, "Thank you, sugar,"
yeah,
did that
she's
wake
so
you up,
sweet.
or were you like
Mel, I was like out of my body. I was
so
just
did you,
praying.
like, just then take your makeup off?
Well, they did a whole bare face before shot of me for that show.
Oh,
I've taken it off live a million times
okay,
since. That
okay.
first show, it was like, yeah, bare face before shot and then the after. And I remember walking over to them. I remember we were, gosh, 6 or 7 minutes in. I didn't know how we were doing, but I knew we weren't cut yet. And then it got down to like a minute left, and the host said, the deep shade's almost gone, the tan shade's almost sold out. And I was like, freaking out. And I remember literally right at the 10-minute mark, this giant sold out sign came up across the screen, and I start crying on national television.
Oh, I love
They
you.
cut from me and went to like Dyson vacuum or something. And I remember my husband came rushing through the double doors of the studio, and and he's like has his arms up, and I'm just sobbing, and I'm like, "Real women have spoken," and I'm just like crying. And I thought he was gonna give me a hug or be all excited, and he just looked at me and he's like, "We're not going bankrupt." And I was like, "Ah!" And I just that one airing, which was September of 2010, became 5 more that year, then 101 the next year, and then I did 250 live shows a year, myself, direct live on QVC year after year. So we built the biggest beauty brand in QVC's history, and the only reason that I share that is because it was years of no, and you're not the
Mm,
right fit, and what I love for anyone listening who needs to hear this is no one can tell you you're not the right fit. No one. And you can get all the no's in the world, but you have your knowing. And by the way, I believe this, Mel. I believe even when you trust your knowing and then it seems like it was wrong and things don't go your way over and over and over. Like I look back at those moments, right? I really wanted that investor to invest in us. Thank God he didn't.
oh
When
my
I
god.
say everything's happening for us, what I mean is like, I was so desperate that if he would have invested in us then, I probably would have given him the majority of the company for probably
Right,
almost no money,
right.
right? By the time many years, 6 years later, after that day, 6 years later, when L'Oreal bought this little company I started in my living room for $1.2 billion cash, it was still I was the largest shareholder. Paulo and I were the largest shareholders. And I look back and it's like, "Oh gosh, thank God, the all the no's happened when they did, even when they sucked, even when it felt like it wasn't fair."
Mm,
And I can look at that in many scenarios. Sometimes we don't have some big positive outcome, but we learn a purpose through a no,
right.
right? We learn a calling through a no. We learn a lesson. We build strength. We build resiliency. We appreciate the beautiful moments so much more when we've gone through the tough ones.
So, have you ever seen that investor since?
I have not seen him. The day that
Of
we
course, I asked the petty question. I'm like, "Have you ever, like, seen him to, like, twist the little knife in there?"
t
Okay.
I heard from him one time ever
Mhm.
again, and it was 6 years later, the day that L'Oreal announced the deal. So because they're a public company, they announced, that they had acquired It Cosmetics, made me the first woman to hold a CEO title of a brand in their 107-year history. They did the big press release. So
That's kinda surprising. 107 years, L'Oreal, a makeup company. It took them that long to have the first female CEO of a brand?
I hope they have many more now. That is my prayer.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you were the trailblazer there too.
It's been, yeah, so many things. It's been a journey. And here's the thing, Mel, it was another woman inside L'Oreal. It was Carol Hamilton, who was head of luxury for North America. She'd been there, gosh, 30 plus years. And she championed for
Mm,
me to keep my CEO title, all the things. Like it was another woman saying, oh, and it's funny because I actually think she should have been the first woman. You know what I mean? And I think
mhm.
again, there's an example, by the way, of I believe, I'm not going to speak for her. I believe she knows. This is my opinion. I think she probably knows she should be the first female CEO. But look how she used what she went through to then, boom, be of purpose and of service and help make sure that I kept my CEO title. Everything we go through. But so they announced it, right? So all of a sudden it was homepage of Wall Street Journal, the press everywhere. And that was the first time and only time since that I heard from that potential investor.
And what did he say?
He said, congratulations on the L'Oreal deal. I was wrong, is what he said, and wished me the best of luck. And
That's a big
so
deal to admit you're wrong.
it is. And so when you speak about petty, so what I did say to him was thank you. But what I wanted to say, like,
What did you want to say?
So in that moment, here's what I thought about. I thought about, do you remember the movie Pretty Woman where like she goes in the store and they wouldn't help her, and then she
Mhm.
goes back? Remember when she goes back?
Yes.
So I wanted to say to him, big mistake, huge, huge. I could give you 1.2 billion reasons why it was a huge mistake. But I didn't. I wouldn't have wanted to be him in that situation. We probably would have been one of the most successful investments in his firm's history. And so, listen, it wasn't I always say rejection is God's protection so often, you
There's
know?
another one, everybody. Rejection is God's protection.
Yeah.
It's a good way to frame it. And I think when you look in the rearview mirror, you know that all the rejections you've faced, especially in relationships, were there to
Mm,
protect you. I think the true thing that you've taught me through your story and through the example that you continue to set, Jamie, is that true power and grace and grit and belief is about seeing that in front of you,
mm,
not behind you.
mm.
That the rejections that you're facing right now, that you can look ahead and realize it's protecting you in this moment.
I can't, like, seriously. By the way, I've never heard anyone put it together like that and such a through line. And I think that it's so true. And I just want to call out one thing that you said too. Every single person listening right now, it is so easy for us to see our setbacks and our hard times and our things where we feel like we're not enough, or we didn't go to the right, job, or we don't come from the right family, or we don't come from the right zip code, or any of those things. It's so easy, like, to think that, okay, so here's what I'm destined to do. And again, it's wild, the power of, because I believe everyone has a calling. I believe everyone has more than one purpose in their life. And I feel like the things we go through, and by the way, let me just be real honest with you. You want me to be really honest? I didn't even connect the dots until just now with you about the diet shakes. I've never shared the stories I share in this book. I've like 95% of them I've never shared with anyone ever, right? My family's going to be like, you're drinking diet shakes in the bathroom in school, right? So this is like a lot of, like, it feels so vulnerable. But until you just said this right now, Tom, I didn't even put the dots together of that. When I was sitting there drinking diet shakes in the bathroom, it's because I didn't feel like I was enough. And I felt like, oh, if I can just be this size, I'll be happy, or I'll be loved, right? Those are the things that we don't even realize we're thinking in those moments. But those things we go through, whatever those hard times are in different forms, right? It's like, oh, wow, they actually, if we do pay attention, they can become our message, our mission, our superpower, right? But I'm putting two and two together live with you right now. And I do a lot of this in the book, but never on that one moment. And I just want to share it in case someone else out there needs to hear this right now, that if we really pay attention to everything we've gone through, and it sets us up for what we're called to do. Even when we think it's stuff we're embarrassed about or want to hide or we're ashamed of, or we're ashamed that something happened in our family or that we made a big mistake in our lives or had a big misjudgment, those things can truly, if we pay attention to them, not only help us refine our intuition, but literally turn into our superpower, right? And when I think about the journey, because the beauty industry is crowded, there's a million brands. And when I entered that space, it was impossible to get department store floor space because it was dominated by all the big companies. And, it's like sometimes we have an idea or a dream and it's very easy just for that simple fact of saying, oh, it's been done before. There's a million other people doing it before. And hearing you talk live now too, one of the things I'm reminded of is every single person in your whole audience, in the world, frankly, nobody can do it the way you're going to do it if you live your truth. And when I think about the decisions along the way of when all the department stores told me no, when everyone said, you're not the right fit, you're not this, you're not that, I'm also realizing live with you right now that you're right. In the bathroom, I've never had this conversation with anyone, by the way. In the bathroom, drinking those diet shakes, I understood at a deep level of pain, the idea of not enoughness. I also understood the power of community, of understanding and seeing the light in other women. In that case, it was girls. We were young, seeing the light and the beauty in other girls when they're not seeing it themselves, but still not seeing it in myself, and having that understanding, right? And that through line then, all the way through the investor telling me, women, I don't believe women will buy makeup that looks like you, your body and your weight. It's like going all the way through that. By that point, when he told me that, I had a lot more life experience. I made a lot more mistakes, and I could actually hear my own gut tell me he's wrong. And I made the decision to trust myself, right? So, it would be a lot longer before we finally got a shot on QVC, and a lot more no's after that investor still. And it's hard in life when nothing around us tells us we're right. It's hard to then listen to that gut and keep going. But for me, it's everything. It's everything. And to use your wife Lisa's example, I think we all have it, but maybe it's a superpower to actually learn to hear it and to trust it and to trust ourselves. For me, it's life's greatest journey. For me, it's how we all step into the person we're born to be versus talk ourselves out of ever becoming that person.
There's so much there, and I want you to keep going. A couple things I want to unpack there. Number one is this unrealistic image for women. It's really interesting. Yeah. With men, it really isn't that way. If you look at football, Tom Brady has a few ads. He's the good looking dude, right? He's got a watch ad or whatever. But the guy that got all the ads was Peyton Manning. It was the everyman when it comes to men. With women, these unrealistic images, especially in the beauty industry, for the most part, are the images that we see. And so you really did revolutionize an industry. That's number one. Number two, it's interesting to me that your dream was to be a broadcaster. I got to tell you, we both bagged groceries at Safeways, and I was a broadcasting major in college, and that was my dream. I didn't know it was going to show up 30 years later, after my entrepreneurial journey. But I think life starts after your first dream goes away. I really believe that's where you're defined. And I'm so curious about this journey with the rejection. I have a philosophy. I don't know if you agree with this. I love the title of your book, Believe It, because what you're talking about, turning up this volume on your inner voice and turning down the external rejections. Mm-hmm. Those rejections you got were over and over again. I was telling my son this, who thinks he wants to be an entrepreneur. He said, Dad, what's one of the things that most people wouldn't tell you? I said, I don't know, that maybe the most important thing is your ability to deal with rejection as an entrepreneur. We talk about vision, we talk about, communication, but can you deal with the rejection? And in your case, it broke my heart, but there was one meeting you had where you thought you had a deal finally, right? With this VC guy. And I want you guys just to feel the depth of the rejection that you may experience as an entrepreneur. And could you do what Jamie did and still push back? So picture years and years of rejection. You're running out of cash. You're working out of your living room. Everyone's telling you no. And then this dude almost says yes, but then really hits you with a hard no. Tell him about that.
Yeah. And I thought literally he was going to be my saving grace, right? Because again, we were down to no money and we got interest from a private equity company and they loved our products. Our product worked, like it really worked. So they loved the product and they wanted to have meetings. So we started going down that path and, you know, they were really big. I mean, they are really big. They've invested in a ton of consumer product companies that you and I buy at the grocery store. And, you know, they made a lot of them household names from nothing. And I just thought, oh my gosh, if they invest, A, I'm not going to go bankrupt. B, maybe they'll help get me into all these retail stores that keep telling me no and keep telling me I'm not the right fit and all that. And so, you know, we did meeting after meeting and we started the diligence phase, which is, you know, where you show all your projections, your product pipeline, everything. And it got down to the last meeting and my husband, Paulo, and I flew up for it. And I thought, like, this is it. Like, this is going to be it. And I'll never forget the head guy was standing about 3 feet from me. And he thanked me. He said, you know, that we should be proud of the product we created. And then he says to me, and he's about 3 feet from me, face to face. And he says, so I want to let you know it's a no. We're going to pass on investing in It Cosmetics. And I said, okay, like I'm used to hearing no at this point, right? And I'm like, all right, well, you know, can you tell me why? Because usually feedback is a gift, usually. And I'm like, can you tell me why? And he's like, do you want me to be really honest? And I said, yeah. And I'll never forget, like, I remember just like him looking at me for a minute and I remember feeling my heart racing really fast. And then I remember seeing his lips move in slow motion. And he basically said, he did say straight to my face, I just don't think women will buy makeup from someone who looks like you with your body and your weight.
Oh, wow.
And I remember it was this moment where for me, it was almost like this lifetime of body doubt and self-doubt kind of like flooded my body and almost felt like I was staring my own fear straight in the eye, listening to him. And I knew I had to keep my faith bigger than it. But Ed, in that moment, like, it's wild. I actually, it hurt. Like I literally went in my car in the parking lot and cried my eyes out. Those things hurt. But what stands out to me in that moment, and I actually never felt, I didn't get mad at him. I still am not mad at him. Because guess what? The whole reason, that whole why beneath the why on why I was doing this company, like he literally passed on investing in my company because he had the exact same mindset, right? That everyone else does about what you have to look like, the box you have to fit into to be successful. And he's just as much I don't want to say victim, byproduct maybe of the whole beauty industry too. He's passing on an investment in my company because of my weight. And I remember this moment, but the thing that sticks out to me most is in this moment, I had this feeling, this deep feeling, like as he's telling me this, that he's wrong. And I had that feeling, but I knew nothing yet that I had done proved that because I had no sales yet really. And I also knew like proving it would first and foremost hinge on me believing it for myself. And, you know, fast forward. And by the way, in the years after that, like it's discipline of recognizing when someone else's voice is playing in your head all of a sudden. And I listened to a show you did actually where you scratch it and that's what I have to do over and over. Like I'd have to literally get really good at turning down the volume on those things because, and I want to tell you a full circle moment that happened. It was so good. But like, I feel like that, what you just shared about telling your son this advice, right? I feel like that's everything because I feel like so many people, what ends up happening is everyone else's rejections, right, end up like equating to self-doubt in our own head, our own self-doubt about ourselves. We start to turn the volume up on that to the point where with all of it, with everyone else's opinions, and in my case, the lack of success around me, it can get so loud that we can't even hear our own internal knowing anymore. And I feel like so many people, and then you have your friends and your family, like they mean the best, but they're seeing you through their own lens of fear and inexperience, right? And so between all of it, so many people I feel like end up literally talking themselves out of their own calling and talking themselves out of their own truth and staying in their comfort zone at like the cost of it chipping away at their soul. We've all done this. And literally missing out on the person they're born to be. Wow. And I feel like and my story is like years and years and years of rejection. But when I look back at the things I did wrong and the things I did right, usually like my biggest mistakes came down to when I actually didn't listen to something I knew in my gut. And I decided to go with something an expert had told me when it didn't feel like quite right. And the biggest successes are when I really listened to that knowing, even when it went against what other people told me. So like this guy telling me this, had I changed who I was, right, and tried to fit some mold that he said would sell, if that was who I was authentically, then great. But it's not for me, right? And so had I ever conformed to him or any of those retailers that told me change this, change that, and maybe we'll bring you into our store, or L'Oreal that for 3 years of meetings said no, and all the things I needed to do differently, had I listened to most of any of that, especially the parts that didn't align with my gut instinct, I would have never sold my company for over $1 billion. I probably would be out of business. So that's
you hear yourself when you say this, Jamie, where you're like, I would have never sold my company for $1 billion. Still, when that comes out of your mouth, is there a part of you like, I sold my company for over $1 billion? Does it still hit you a little bit?
On one hand, I still can't process it. On the other hand, you'll understand this when I say this, and you won't judge me for saying this. And I believe actually everyone in your community, I believe they're part of your community because they'll understand this too. Selling your company for $1 billion is exciting, but like for me, I don't feel like I'm put on this earth to compete with anyone else. I feel like I'm put on this earth to compete with who God made me capable of becoming.
Amen.
And I feel like I'm just getting started. Like I'm not there yet. So selling a company for $1 billion is exciting, but like, I feel like stepping into all of who I am and serving and giving and all the things I'm really called to do, I still feel like I'm not there yet. By the way, you talked about.
I feel like having watched you speak a couple times and then listening now, I feel like all of that happened, all of the struggle, all of the ups and downs, all of the selling of the company, all you've learned, all you've been able to articulate, your broadcast background, all of that stuff is leading you right now to your time. Like I think you were called for what you're doing now, which is teaching and inspiring people and giving them hope. However, you did say it came full circle. Yeah. What did you mean when you said that? What's the full circle?
Ed. Okay, you love this. Okay, so this is so good because I actually never got mad at him, right? Because for me, it was like something bigger than him. Yeah. So fast forward a few years, and when we actually ended up selling to L'Oreal, it was their largest U.S. acquisition in their history, and so it made the homepage of Wall Street Journal, a bunch of stuff like that. And the day that the deal was announced, I got an email from him, and he said, congratulations, I was wrong, so proud of you. That whole thing he did, and also I learned that it would. So two things. I learned it would have been the most successful investment in his firm's history. But here's the thing, and this is where our setbacks, I feel like, oh my gosh, our setbacks, even when they suck, like it sucked to hear him say those words to me. It hurt. I cry, like it hurts, right? Rejection in almost any form basically says to us, you're not enough. You don't belong. You're not worth, I don't think I will make money off you, or I don't believe in you, or it comes in all those forms and it sucks. But I really believe even almost all the time, when I look back at almost all the rejections, I feel like that, like, again, those setbacks really are setups. And sometimes rejection is really like serendipitous grace, wrapped in this package labeled painful rejection. And what I mean by that is I was so desperate at the time. I think you just posted, I just saw your thing where you're like, scarcity is value. So yeah, I had no scarcity back then. I would have given him like any part of my company. We were down to under $1,000 in our bank account. I didn't know how we were going to survive. Had he wanted to invest, had he said yes to us that day, I would probably give him the majority of the company for probably almost no money, just hoping to survive. But because he didn't believe in me, and because we got so much rejection along the way, when we ended up selling to L'Oreal 8 years into the business, I was still the largest shareholder.
That's awesome.
And so, right?
I love this. Serendipitous grace. I may steal that from you. That is beautiful. And you guys have to say something. It's why you want to get this book. It's loaded with information like this. It's loaded with stories like this about believing it. Why do you need to believe it? Let's just unpack this rejection thing, and then we're going to get to a magic moment. The reason that I think your ability to deal with rejection is so important, it's not talked about enough. Let's just be honest. You know why 99.9% of dreams die, everybody? You eventually get too much rejection. So if that's the thing that's going to cause you not to get your dream, 99.9% of the time, it's just there becomes a threshold that people don't take the rejection long enough. So they don't stick around to receive the grace. And so if that is true, if we already know that going in, then why not pre-negotiate in the very beginning what price you're willing to pay? Hopefully it's anything, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, so that the 99.9% of the reasons why your dream won't happen, you've already set in your favor if you've just decided you'll take the rejection. That's why it's such a big part. How do you take the rejection? You got to believe it. And that's why this book is so powerful. So we lead to this point, guys. And again, the beautiful thing about Jamie's story is it's her vulnerabilities and her authenticity that made the brand relevant, all the way up to the extreme magic moment. Don't hide your insecurities. Don't hide your blemishes, guys, figuratively and literally in your entrepreneurial journey. Get people wanting to root for you. Your fears and insecurities are what connect you with the marketplace. Ironically, you don't have to hide them. You can work on them, but there's nothing wrong with saying I have them. So finally, somehow, you get this moment on QVC, right? And you are so brilliant in this moment. You ask them, I'll let you tell the story, but to me, it's like, if you don't do this thing, again, maybe it still doesn't hit all the way to the last second, the last moment. It was your vulnerability that connected you with the audience.
I am obsessed with an idea that you have in the book about how all the hard things are going to, like we started with that quote, they're either going to break you or they're going to make you. And really that's up to you. And the stories you share in the book are really, they draw you in with they are both entertaining because they're well written and well told. They're gut wrenching at times because I can imagine what it would be like to go through that. But they act ultimately as a yellow brick road in a way that I found very enticing in your book. And one of the bricks on the yellow brick road was that your father was an alcoholic. And you said something in the book that I was really impacted by, given my wife, Lisa, and what she's like. You said, my dad loved me, and he was a kind and gentle man who quietly struggled with alcoholism. And the way that you described that was very generous. And you said, but there were times you would sit and stare at the clock, and because you had to wait for him to wake up, which your mom would be off working. And so sometimes it could be hours of waiting for him to wake up, and he would wake up, or you would get to the time where you were allowed to wake him up, and then he would ask you for an hour or two. And then I just imagine you sitting there watching the clock flip until he finally gets up and you guys can hang out. And in that you said, my dad inadvertently taught me that women are superheroes that have to be stronger than men, because that's what my mom was, a superhero who was essentially doing everything by herself. And I was like, I know that it is, Jamie, I don't wish difficulties on anybody. But man, when they're looked at from the right lens, they make pretty extraordinary people. So that's a story you tell early in the book. The yellow brick road then leads to a photo of you and 7 of your friends, so you and 6 other people. And you break down. Every one of you guys has overcome. It's almost absurd. The fact that out of 7, 2 of you were adopted. There's breast cancer. There's learning difficulty. I mean, it was crazy. And yet, each and every one of them is absurdly successful. How do people harness difficulties like that to become something powerful instead of, leaning into the victim side, which anybody would understand, people pulling the victim card from that? But how do you pull something else?
The very first and most important thing on how is you have to want to. And I think that every human being can easily go into victim mentality on a lot of things that have happened in all of our lives, right? And it's a mentality that actually can, I think, reward you in a lot of ways, and also become a justification too for staying inside your comfort zone when it comes to things like going after your dreams. And it makes sense for a lot of people, right? And again, I think there's a time. I mean, I'm not going to speak to people that, I'm not going to speak to a lot of the really hard things that require a lifetime of work to figure out. What I will say is therapy is the best thing I've ever done in really understanding this. And I actually talk about that.
Does it allow you to recontextualize? Is that the idea?
Yeah, and to understand it at a deep level. And by the way, your show, like this conversation, to me, these are the things that are so important that we invest in ourselves and do, right? Because I mean, I don't want to stay in a place where it could be easy to stay at in my life. I think that the quote you started out with, like, when these tough times happen, do you warrior up or do you victim up? Do you level up or do you give up, right? The up is up to you. And I do believe why I share the story of my 7 closest friends is because I think this is important. I think a lot of people out there are like me and maybe have loving family, loving friends. But if you were to turn the volume up on all of them and they were to be your only inner circle, it'd be really easy for self-doubt to take over. It'd be really easy to dim your own light. And I talk about my journey of how I chose my circle around me. And it's never based on a commonality of life experience. It's my closest friends. And I think this is important for everyone listening, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have an inner circle that empowers me. How do I find one? I would say impact theory and impact your university. That alone can be a part of your inner circle. That's a voice and conversations and information that you want to turn the volume up on. And I talk about this because I think this is universal for everyone and so important to do this. A lot of times people build their circle of friends based on who they went to school with or things they have in common and all the stuff, right? Maybe it's a group of people from work because you're around them all the time, whatever it is. And I think that that's not always the right thing. I think who your circle is so important. And for me, I go deep on this in the book and talk about each one of their stories because I want to drive the point home that who you do surround yourself with, and when you judge them by their heart and how they pour into you and champion you and don't tell you this crap you just because you want to hear it, they tell you the real truth, which is so important. They don't get jealous when you're flying high. They want you to fly higher. I talk about this commonality of traits, and yet my closest group of friends have literally almost nothing in common. Their backgrounds are so different. They have different faiths and no faith. They one of them was homeless all growing up, then lived in the projects, and then figured out how to build her own circle and become an entrepreneur. And she figured out how to turn down the volume of negativity and lack of dreaming of all the people around her, for the most part, that she was raised in. And how did she turn that volume up on her own inner light? And I share this common thread, really just to inspire a mindset shift sometimes of, oh, you know what? My circle of friends, each person listening right now, my circle of friends, they don't need to think like I do or pray like I do or love like I do or anything else. But if I surround myself with people that are truly telling the truth, loving me authentically and uplifting and dreaming big with me, and calling me out on the BS when I start to talk myself out of my own truth, right? Which we all do. It's a lifelong journey. Talk about the power of finding people like that and surrounding yourself with them. And I think they can be people in real life. And I also think that they can be people that you let pour into you who maybe you've never even met, like you. like your show for people. You know what I mean? I think that that's really powerful. Who we let speak into our lives and who we turn the volume down on, but still love anyway, is so important. Because one of our biggest mistakes is turning the volume up on the people just because we love them and they're our family. And then all of a sudden, that's all the noise we hear, and it impacts our whole life.
Talk to me about the ability to turn the volume up and down. That was one of the things I found really extraordinary in your book. Like, if I were going to do like a spoof of your book, it would go something like this. Somebody was really fucking mean. I cried like a motherfucker. And then I walked in the next room like a warrior. Like, it's that over and over and over. I love that. Like, every time. Well, I mean, you actually have a whole chapter in the book about swinging your big balls, which we should definitely talk about. But first, give me the idea. How do you turn the volume down? When you said that earlier about the guy who said, look, people aren't going to buy makeup from somebody that looks like you. How do we grab the volume knob on something that gnarly?
Yeah. I mean, it is such a disciplined practice. It's such a skill. It's hard. I mean, just yesterday, I had someone do something that I thought was like a super close friend, and I was just blindsided, and I felt so betrayed. And listen, we all go through these things, and they're hard. And one of my friends many years ago, Bob Goff is his name, he taught me this, and it just stuck. I just feel like it was so important to talk about it because this tool that Bob had taught me, where he talked about your own microphone and then the volume dial. And he basically, I imagine, right? Because, you know, that I have this microphone. Everyone listening right now, imagine you have your own microphone, and you have to get into really good practice of like who you hand your microphone to and let speak into it. And what I had to learn, one example of this is, you know, my dad, who was an alcoholic, who was a good man with a really bad addiction, and loved me the best way he knew how with his own capacity. And I remember I was, you know, working, I was always super ambitious. I wanted to get a car and go travel, all the things. So I had 4 jobs in high school. And, you know, I was working, one of my jobs, I was working in a health club. And I started as a receptionist. And then they said, well, if you sell memberships, you'll make commission on those too. And I started selling a lot of memberships. And I was like, this is great. And so after high school, I didn't go to school right away. I moved out, got my own apartment. I was making like $55,000 a year, which was more than my dad at his job he'd been at. And I never forget when I made this decision I was going to go to school. I was like, okay, because I just wanted to get out, meet other people and like figure stuff out. And I remember when I told him I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go to school. And he was mortified. He's like, what are you doing? Like, do you know how much money you're making right now? I mean, he was so upset and so worried about me that I was making a huge mistake. And so I remember even in that moment, you know, we all have experiences like that in our lives with our family, right? They're seeing things through their own lens of experience. But whether it's a story like that, or it's just a friend that you love hanging out with and you go to the gym with only, but anytime you share a hope and dream, all of a sudden you feel them lower your vibration. Like you feel it, right? Because they don't get it, or they don't like it, or they, whatever it is. Bob Goff taught me this, that basically you learn, oh, I'm going to take back my microphone from them on those topics, right? I'm going to talk to them about my workout today, or in my dad's case, you know, what's happening on the news or whatever. But I started learning with my own big hopes and dreams. I don't give other people my microphone who are then just going to literally lower my vibration because of their own lens of limitation. And it's the skill you develop. And when you imagine holding your own microphone, listen, we all, you know, if you were blessed to have a family or friends that you love, it's not like, you know, you want to just X them out of your life because they don't understand your hopes and dreams. But learning to just not share them all with them, hold your own microphone, talk to them about other things, like what's on The Bachelor, or like what's going on with whatever, right? And love them but put those boundaries in place. And then the other thing is the volume dial, and that's big. And, you know, people have said things to us that have hurt us, probably universally. There's probably not a single person out there that hasn't had someone say something to them that hurts them deeply. And it is human nature to relive it over and over and over and over in our own head to the point where we carve a groove and it's like it starts to stick and take root. And I think it is so important mentally for me. Like every time that dude who said no one will buy makeup from you, and there were so many other rejections that I talk about in the book. You know, when I went to Sephora and felt like I didn't belong and I didn't fit in and all those things, you know, a lot of times the most hurtful words we hear are the ones we say to ourselves and the ones we make up and telling ourselves we're not enough and all that kind of stuff. And I have to be mindful and intentional and literally imagine myself when those thoughts come up, stopping them, turning down the volume, and then turning up the volume on something else until I believe it. So
now you use visualization quite a bit. Is that intentional? Because I know that when you had your first big thing on QVC, you went a week early, sat in the parking lot every day, and imagined it going well. And I was like, whoa, she preps like an athlete.
Why I brought up Oprah was because I think when people are watching you, you've kind of come out of nowhere in terms of the thought leadership space, which is amazing. Like a year ago, people didn't really know who you were necessarily outside of the beauty industry. And now like, she's everywhere, which is fantastic. But like authenticity is the word that just keeps coming up over and over and over again. And your courage, your willingness to bear it all and share your story. It's what I think of what you did in the beauty industry reminds me of what Oprah would have done if she was in the beauty industry. There's like that through line of, I guess, still what would Oprah do? So I just thought it was curious that she was your kind of hero or one of your heroes growing up and sitting there in the car thinking about the color purple. Does that resonate? Like, I think if Oprah was going to go sell makeup, she would have it be the every woman on the show, not just the fancy models.
Yeah, and I think that her whole life is about authenticity. You know, one of the things, absolutely, it resonates. Yeah, thank you, by the way, for saying that. That's like the biggest compliment in the world. And, you know, yeah, the whole personal growth space. I mean, I remember 20 years ago, I was a waitress at Denny's, and I would save my tip money at Denny's to buy Tony Robbins' personal power tapes and attend my first ever seminar. And I've always loved and believed, like it helped me then believe that where I come from doesn't have to determine where I'm going. And I just feel like I'm a lifetime student with everyone else. And, you know, I went through a decade of starting a business with nothing and going through years and years of rejection and then figuring out how to turn every no that I faced, how to not take those no's personal. And there were some personal no's, but how to not take them personal, how to turn them into yeses, and went through the process of building a team of over 1,000 people, leading departments, made a lot of mistakes. I worked 100-hour weeks for close to a decade, and there's things I would do differently. And, you know, then we went through the process of the acquisition process. So L'Oreal acquired our business for in this all cash deal in 2016 for $1.2 billion, and went through the whole exit process. And you know, I feel like why I wrote this book, why it might feel like I'm popping up out of nowhere, because there's a lot of people that are amazing at motivation and inspiration. And I think for me, I've actually been heads down, like building a business for a decade, right? In the sense of like all the rejection, the resiliency, making lots of mistakes, and then doing lots of things right. And, you know, I had this big realization about 2 years ago. For 5 years, I would have different lit agents approaching me to do a book. And I always said no, because they're like, we can get you a ghostwriter. And I'm like, you know, no, I know that you can't fake authenticity. And if I ever do it, I want to pour my heart and soul into it. I want it to matter. I want it to be, you know, everything I wish I'd known that would have saved me a lot of self-doubt, that would have saved me a lot of nights crying myself to sleep. And so I always said no to doing a book or a movie, all that stuff. And then about 2 years ago, I realized something. I realized that every single day on Instagram, I was getting messages, I was getting DMs from people saying, oh my gosh, you know, congrats on your business and all this, but like, did you just get lucky? Or like, did you have a lot of connections? Because I'm not getting traction in my business and I'm getting rejected and I'm embarrassed to ever tell anyone about it. I'm thinking about quitting, all those things, right? And I realized, Evan, that, oh my gosh, like everything I've gone through in the past decade, but also in my whole life, if we keep it inside of us and we don't share it, like then people just see the highlight reel. And when people Google my story, they just see Denny's waitress builds $1 billion entrepreneur or builds $1 billion business, right? And then people feel alone in their own struggles and in their own setbacks and in their own, everything. And I was like, okay, I think that if I actually share all the real stories behind the stories, that maybe it'll help other people on their own journey. Be like, oh, this is what Jamie did when someone said, no one's going to buy makeup from someone who looks like you because of your body and weight. This is how she handled staring fear and rejection straight in the eye and keeping her faith bigger than it. Like, I share so many stories in here that aren't for me. I'm donating 100% of the proceeds from the book, 100% to Feeding America and to Together Rising. And I literally wrote this. I wrote every single one of the 80,000 words in it because I just felt like, I think everything we all go through, when we can make it about something other than ourselves, when we can make it about something bigger than ourselves, when it can help other people, that's really where our fulfillment comes. Whether it's little things we do every day or big things like writing a book. So that's really why I wrote it. So it's so funny because you're like, you come out of nowhere. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing 100-hour weeks for 10 years. Like, I think it's been this crazy journey. And by the way, this started by literally, Evan, I don't know if anyone knows the story, but when I knew it was time to write the book, I knew it was time to step away from the company I built in my living room. And it was so hard. I love the team, like family, right? We built over 1,000 employees and across the country and world. And so 3 days after, it was 3 days, how many days? I don't know how many days after leaving the business, I was like, okay, I want to just do something I love. Let me go to a personal growth event. I bought tickets to Brendan Burchard's event, had never met him, and brought a couple of women I mentor. I mentor a lot of other women and friends. And I had these tickets to the event. And he had a speaker fall through a couple days before the event. And he sent a group text out to his friends. And he's like, does anyone know of a great speaker? And somebody had nominated me. And he and I ended up getting on a phone call. He's like, could you hop on stage and do an hour keynote speech? There's no script, no teleprompter, nothing. There's a few thousand people in the audience. You'll be live. Can you just hop on stage and do an hour keynote? So I'm freaking out. I don't know Brendan, right? I don't know. I'm on the phone with him. And I'm like, absolutely. Like, yep, for sure. And then inside I'm like, oh crap. Like I'm like freaking out. And then I tell him, I'm like, well, I don't know if you know this, but I already have tickets to the event. So I'm going to be there anyway. He's like, what? He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. I bought tickets. I'm bringing a couple of women I mentor. We're sitting in the audience. And he's like, you're, and I'm like, it's this funniest thing, like the most serendipitous thing. And that day I hopped on, this is talking about popping up in the personal growth space, but I hopped on his stage and did an hour keynote. All of us were sobbing. Yes, that picture. So this picture, I totally forgot this, Evan, in this moment. This picture, so Simon & Schuster wanted me to do like a professional photo shoot, right? Which is what you do as an author, a proper photo shoot. I'm like, you know what? What if we just share a live moment real, where we're in real connection with other human beings? That day I'm talking about is so funny. You're so smart, Evan. Oh my gosh, this is why everyone gets advice from you. So this day was on his stage. I popped up live, did the hour keynote. We're all laughing, crying together in the audience, and yeah, a picture taken by Maggie Kirkland, who was there, just snapped this photo and like, let's use a real moment. So that was really fun. Then I got off of the stage and Brendan came over a couple of days later, met my husband and my daughter. And that was, I guess, almost 2 years ago, year and a half ago. now I talk to Brendan every single day. And now he's one of my closest friends and amazing. And a few months ago, Tony Robbins asked me to speak at Business Mastery. And then he and I ended up doing 3 hours live together, which wasn't planned. And so that was a big full circle moment, especially going back to the Denny's days where I would save my tip money to buy his tapes. And so it's been a wild year. It might feel new, but it also kind of feels like, I think everything we do in our life, even when we don't see it in the moment, the setbacks, the hard times, the things that suck, the things that aren't fair, I feel like they're all setups in the long term for how strong we need to be and for what we're supposed to do on the next step of our journey.
I love it.
You then spent 3 years as CEO of L'Oreal. Amazing, freaking incredible. How do you now reassess, or maybe not even reassess, who you are today?
Yeah.
What you stood for? Does that still resonate? How do you evolve? Because we all have an identity, right? And so for so long, your identity was speaking out to all these women who maybe didn't have a voice, and you were finally the one that was saying, yes, we may have skin conditions. Yes, this may affect us, but we don't have to succumb to it. Yeah. So you've been like the advocate for that for so long, so powerfully. Where do you go now? And how do you assess who Jamie is today?
Yeah, I think that question is such a struggle for anybody who has been all in on something to the point where you're like burnt out.
Exactly.
And like you said, it almost becomes your identity. And that question, by the way, is part of why we chose to sell the business, because we did 100-hour weeks for 10 years and I cared so much, but it always comes at a price. So we grew the business to over 1,000 employees across the country, became the largest beauty brand in QVC history, and then the largest, and we got a yes from Ulta Beauty, grew to be their largest brand, finally got a yes from Sephora as well, and some department stores, and started launching internationally. And it never got easier, right? Because I used to think like, one day, right, I can afford to hire people and they're gonna help me and it's gonna be so much easier. And then what I learned is, oh my gosh, when you do hire people, especially people that are smarter than you in other areas, it is such a gift. But even if you hire the best of the best people, you still then have a new job, which is managing people and making sure they're happy and dealing with competitors trying to steal them and dealing with HR issues and this and that and it's this whole other thing, and it never got easier. And one of the things I will say that I have personally not been able to succeed at, so I could call this a failure, is I never figured out how to have any semblance of balance. And I think women especially feel this weird pressure where they're supposed to just somehow figure out balance, and I think it's a lie.
Do you seek balance though?
I have gone through times where I'm like, I need to get more balance. I just think it's a lie where you just end up feeling like you're failing all the time at everything. I think that the best you can do, the best I have figured out to do, is to try and be present in what I'm doing, and just to commit to the choices I make, because I think balance, I think it's impossible, first of all. But what I will say is everything comes at a price. And building this business and working this hard had so many great benefits. You know, we have millions and millions of customers and community that I just feel like they believe in themselves more, even if they've never bought a product. It wasn't even about that. It was them being in a community where, you know, they felt like they were enough. And so that always made it worth it to me. But the amount I pushed myself, and my husband as well, it came at a price. And for many years, well, we spent every single holiday, anniversary, birth in the QVC green room. We grew to doing over 250 live shows a year, and I did them all myself for 8 years. With Paulo, he was in the green room watching the numbers, figuring out the orders, figuring everything. And even when we grew to hundreds of employees, we were still working out of the QVC green room and in between shows and airings on the laptop, working on product development and doing conference calls. And it was so much. And when we grew to be really large and started launching internationally, I realized that's a lot of work to try and understand like regulatory compliance laws in Thailand and HR laws, and it's so much. And so then we thought, okay, if we partner with L'Oreal or sell our business to L'Oreal, one of the biggest blessings in all of it was that they have people on the ground in like just about every country. And so you have experts that are hyper local and understand the culture and the cultural sensitivities and the importance of, that country's regulatory compliance and all that like stuff that it's hard to figure out on your own and scale. And I knew that I needed to, I knew that if I didn't sell the company, we might go another 10 years and I might still be spending every holiday working and every birthday and every anniversary. We still didn't have kids and we had tried for 10 years. And I think sometimes stress takes such a toll on your body. And I just felt like I was an amazing entrepreneur and CEO and a terrible owner of a body and a terrible every other thing, wife, daughter, friend. I mean, I would do everything I could to help my friends and family, but except for physically be present, right? And I just kind of realized I have to make a change. And so we sold 100% of It Cosmetics to L'Oreal. It was their largest acquisition in U.S. history.
And you've been able to double it, correct?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Isn't that crazy? So they acquired It Cosmetics 3 years ago, and the business has doubled since then. And
but I want to go back to the thing that you were saying about identity. So you sell the company. Your identity has been, I'm the hustle and grind person. I'm the one that sacrifices. I'm the one that goes all in. You leave it and
and it's hard, and it's great and amazing and hard. And we, so a year and a half ago, we had our first child via surrogate. Yeah, via surrogate. Her name's Wonder. And, I grew up with parents that worked a lot. And I struggle with going, okay, I really want to be there for my daughter, but my tendencies are very much, I'm just all in, and I want to, I think that idea I shared in the beginning of sort of like one day, God willing, a million years from now, when I die, I want everything used up in me that I can possibly give to be of service to other people. And that has not left me. And I just know anytime I talk with women or entrepreneurs, or I just, I feel it's so right, and that's been really fun. And, for so many years, lit agents and publishers would always reach out. And one year the movie Joy came out, and that year was the year all the screenwriters and stuff started reaching out about my story. But I was so burnt out, and I didn't take a single meeting. I actually said no to every single meeting for many years because I was so burnt out. And I remember hearing Oprah once say, "Don't ever write an empty book. There's too many empty books out there." And when I heard that, it was like, it scared me, and also was like a really powerful thing. And I thought, I'm never going to do anything until I can be all in, present, all of that. And so I just started taking meetings now for just how can I share my story in a way that can, be of service to other people. And so
anyone watching on YouTube right this second, drop in the comments, yes, we want the book. Yes, we want the book. Yes, we want the book. We're going to have you back for that as well. But seriously, like that book, when you're talking about having, giving service and really doing it for other people, like that seems like a almost like a no-brainer next step for sure.
Yeah.
You've already done so much incredible things and impacted so many people that it's incredible and exciting to think about where you're going to go.
Yeah.
But you've got to take care of yourself first. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it.
So true. Taking care of ourselves is something for so long that even women especially just felt, and men, there was different types of stigmas, but people just felt like you were selfish if you did that. And it's it's not true. It's like the least selfish thing you can do because you show up your best for everyone else too. And
I actually like that you said men as well, because that's one big thing about the show is that, you know, we talk mainly about women because it's our own experiences, but you're 100% right on the fact that men, like if a man was like, yeah, I'm going to go get a massage and a pedicure and I'm going to go in the steam room, like I would hear about that way less than a woman.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't they have the same type of self-care of the vessels of their bodies?
Yes.
Like, so I'm
and
really glad
mental
that you
health
said
too,
that.
all of it.
mental
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
What is your superpower? As I throw it in there at the end.
Yeah, I feel like my intuition's my superpower, but my biggest superpower is my faith.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock this house and welcome to the stage, Jamie Kern Lima! Baby Kern Lima!
Every single one of us has had someone tell us we're not enough. Every single one of us has had someone say words to us that hurt.